Danielle Hunter signs an extension with the Houston Texans yesterday, and in an extension of what they've been doing with Danielle Hunter, the strategy since he got here is, hey, give him a 2-year deal and guarantee pretty much all of it. And then last year they just tacked on another year, keeping it a 2-year deal. They did it again. I was frankly a little bit surprised by the level of consternation I saw by Texans fans that were either upset about this or concerned about the fact that the Texans were outlaying so much money for a guy that's been one of the best 5 defensive ends or edge rushers in the last couple of years. Just by way of reminding you, this is Danielle Hunter. This is just a highlight reel I put up that I made from 2024. Same level of play in 2025. This has been an awesome football player for the last couple of years, and the Texans have had him on short-term guaranteed deals that frankly, not every top-tier player is looking for or wants, because guys in the NFL are notoriously upset that they don't get guaranteed contracts, when the fact of the matter is teams can't be giving out fully guaranteed contracts in the sport of football for long-term contracts, because the downside and the penalty is just too great when a guy ends up getting injured. Look, we see it in Cleveland where Deshaun Watson hasn't got injured. He's just turned into an awful quarterback as of yet, and they've got all that guaranteed money sitting on the salary cap. With Danielle Hunter, you get a guy who's willing to take a shorter-term deal at a really, really high price. But the Texans, if at some point they decide they need to move on from him or he's not worth the same amount of money, they can cut ties pretty easily. And that's a valuable thing to have, because what the Texans have in their salary cap is a lot of flexibility in future years. And the team has made some moves with Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie in the last couple days. There's probably more to come with other players where they restructure their deals to create as much space as they need. With Danielle Hunter, they end up actually saving $14 or $15 million on this year's cap, but they add, I think, $40 million to next year's cap for a guy that's still producing at a very, very high level. And yes, he's in his 30s. At some point, it's going to decline, but they're not on the hook for it. And I mean, he's an incredible football player. He got hosed by not making the Pro Bowl this year, even though he was second team All-Pro. But everything about Danielle Hunter is the exact reason why the Texans defense is as good as it is. So I know one of the big concerns by some people that I respect, by no means do I think these people are idiots or anything, but I disagree with them slightly. I'll start with Cody Stutes. Very, very much to respect Cody Stutes. But he says the Danielle Hunter extension has me preparing for far less financial investment in the offensive line as I had hoped. I'll take Brett Coleman, another guy that I really respect. Very level-headed, very successful YouTube channel, very analytical, and yet Brett is also a Texans fan. And when it comes to fandom, sometimes we start freaking out about stuff. He said, okay, so the Texans' plan at O-line might be. Now, this is after the Texans had re-signed Trent Brown. He's thinking Ursery, Patterson, Andrews, Ingram, and Brown as the starters with either rookies or Blake Fisher behind him. This is where I feel like I have to remind everybody. Free agency hasn't begun yet. The Texans haven't even had a chance to disappoint us by not spending money on any of the free agent offensive linemen. I think they're going to be willing to spend. I think they were willing to spend on offensive line last year. They just didn't want to overpay, and maybe they undergauged the market, or maybe they should have been more aggressive. 100%, I agree with that. I don't think that you can look at the Danielle Hunter signing and really following the same strategy that they've been using for a few years now to say that that's going to be the reason they're not aggressive on the offensive line. If this makes any sense. I'm not trying to be overly nuanced here, but two things can be true. They can be willing to spend money on offensive linemen, but not end up liking any of the deals that are out there. Nick Caserio told us yesterday that there's about 25 or 30 total free agents that are probably viable targets for them. What percentage of those guys are offensive linemen, and how many of those guys jibe with how much money they're willing to spend? I don't know. I think that if Tyler Linderbaum were willing to take a deal like Danielle Hunter, which is short-term, fully guaranteed, you guys are willing to extend it if I play really well this year, if Linderbaum's into that, the Texans would be totally willing to spend it. What they don't want to do is do what a lot of teams have gotten themselves in trouble with, is signing guys to 4 or 5 year deals and the guy ends up lasting a couple of years with you. J.C. Jackson a couple of years ago with the Chargers Von Miller with the Bills, any of these guys where they're old, well, J.C. Jackson wasn't old, but Von Miller, an older guy, and you have this huge outlaying of cash, and it ends up not being a good deal and hamstrings you a little bit in the long run. A couple years ago, this is when everything started changing in the NFL with the way teams operate. Just to show you the hazards of long-term deals, this is, I think this is from 2022 or 2023. I've had it sitting around on my hard drive for a while, but you look at on 2-year deals, the average percentage completion is 60%. So free agents on 2-year deals, 60%. You might say, well, those aren't top tier free agents. Okay, 3rd-year guys, average of 40% completion. 4-year contracts, average of about 22%. You go into 5th year and it gets even less. Your credit card spending, if you start dealing a lot of these long-term deals, I think the Texans are willing to be aggressive with some of these younger offensive linemen or with younger or top-tier offensive linemen. They just don't want to get hamstrung onto the future. One of the other arguments against the Danielle Hunter signing, let me get this red X out of here, is just simply that, hey, you got to pay Will Anderson. You got to pay CJ Stroud sometime in the next couple of years. Those guys, when they get extended, the money doesn't kick in until a couple years later, the big time money. So in the short term, Danielle Hunter is still kind of positioned that, hey, Will Anderson's on his rookie deal. His pay scale wouldn't increase this year immediately. You've still got a lot of room in 2026, 2027, and then on into 2028 to maneuver. So I'm not worried about that. I am worried about whether or not the Texans in general are going to make the right decisions on a lot of these things. One more thing I'm concerned about, and this is me and my age. Can somebody please, one of you Gen Z, explain what the hell this is to me? I know that it's a reference to something or something that's going on online. This is by the Texans Twitter account. I am old. I don't get these references. I know the Texans social media department is doing a good job because I'm old and I don't understand these references. I suspect that it's really clever and good and funny and not insulting, but I just don't get these references. Somebody help me out here. Let's see, I keep forgetting that free agency hasn't started yet. I'm still optimistic that we'll pick up some of the best to good offensive players. Lance Zierlein, another guy, again, that I respect a lot and I think makes a good point here. I'm not going to argue against him. This was on that Brett Coleman thread. He says, the only thing I hate about that approach, and this was in reference to somebody else. I think it was Stressen's talking about signing some of the more affordable guys. The only thing I hate about that approach is they continue to Band-Aid their offensive line, which means a lack of continuity from year to year, and they need to rework every single year. At some point, you're going to have to hit on a higher number of draft picks and lock in with at least 4 stable starters. I 100% agree with Lance on this one, and as many of you know, Lance's father was an offensive line coach forever in the NFL, and Lance knows his offensive line play especially. The continuity part of it is where it gets dicey, and if you look at the approach that they took last year on the offensive line, you bring in Cam Robinson, didn't work out, brought in Ed Ingram, worked out, brought in Laken Tomlinson, didn't work out, brought in Trent Brown, worked out, and I think 2 of those guys were good to have on the team. The problem there is that Ed Ingram was only on a 1-year deal and expiring contract, and you might not have him back. If they can get him back at a reasonable cost, and I think he's going to go out and test the market most likely, unless there might be news on it right this moment. I think they'd like to have him back, but only at the right cost. All right, well, if they make the financially sound decision and let him go, the opportunity cost there is you're going to have to bring in yet another guy. Hopefully he fits the system. Hopefully you got him for more than 1 year. And the continuity and the cohesion that you want on the offensive line has to start anew with maybe potentially 3 guys on the interior, a rookie offensive tackle, depending on what shakes out with Trent Brown at right tackle. And that's a lot in any given year. The Bears showed last year that they could improve a lot with aggressive spending, and I know I keep bringing them up, but that's kind of the template for what we're looking at. And I'm kind of feeling I'm setting myself up to be the schmuck because I keep telling people, hey, just be patient. Be patient. We'll see what they do. We'll see what they do, even though the track record is that they're not going to be that aggressive on the offensive line. His cap number, if I didn't point it out, his cap figure went from it's a $14 million savings. I want to say it's at $15 million now, where it was at $29 million. I might be wildly incorrect on that, but it's about a $14 or $15 million cap savings for this year. It adds on, because it's a fully guaranteed contract next year, it adds on to chunk to next season, but they've still got room to maneuver. The Texans right now are right about middle of the road on where they are with the cap. They've got, as of this morning, and I think this was, this is with the Stingley and the Jalen Petrie restructure, the Hunter extension, the David Montgomery and the Howard trades, excludes the Trent Brown deal, $23 million of effective cap space. That puts them about middle of the road. There's probably going to be some more renegotiations. They could restructure Nico's contract pretty easily and clear up a whole bunch more space. So cap space is not going to be a barrier to anything reasonably aggressive that they want to do. They can create more space pretty easily. Think of it this way. A lot of the contracts the Texans have right now, I look at it as almost like a home equity line of credit. They can tap into the home equity line of credit, which is a pretty reasonable and respectable, responsible way to take on debt, as opposed to extreme credit card spending in the NFL. That's where you take a bunch of guys, maybe that you don't even like that much as football players, and just convert to signing bonus, extend their contracts long into the future. That starts to mount up over time. Nick does a pretty good job of managing that. So I feel like he operates on the home equity line of credit model, as opposed to, say, the Saints. And for whatever reason, people always bring up the Saints as, hey, the cap's not real. And they'll say, hey, look at what the Saints did. Yeah, the Saints have been in purgatory for 4 or 5 years because of all the credit card spending they did. The cap is very real. It's just not as simple as people want it to be. So when people see that, this team created some cap space, the cap isn't real. No. It's 100% real. It's just not as simple as looking at the current cap figure and thinking that has a whole lot to do with what you can and can't do in any given year. I'm going to react to the Nick Caserio interview that I did, a reaction to my own reaction to our Nick Caserio interview yesterday. So I'm going to get that prepped up, and I'll see all of you later.